clock on the nose, so we're going to go ahead and bring our meeting to order. At this time, Assistant City Clerk, would you please call the roll of council?
Yes, the Honorable Mayor Pro Tem James Whitmore.
Present.
The Honorable Linda J. Davis.
Present.
The Honorable Alex Heath.
Present.
The Honorable Samantha Hudson. Present. The Honorable Hattie Portis Jones.
Present.
And the Honorable Ulysses J. Smallwood.
Present.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. At this time, Mr. City Administrator, we'll go to our first agenda item.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This evening, as our sole agenda item, we have a presentation from Malden and Jenkins, our longtime audit firm, with the results of the September 30th, 2023 audit. And I would invite them to come to the podium and share with us their presentation at this time. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me start with Mr. Brian Stevens,
Oh, it's fine.
our finance director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
So as Mr. Phillips says, we do have Malden and Jenkins here to present the results of our audit. Doug Moses is here. I'm sure some of you may have seen him before. I first met Doug probably 15 years ago at 3 different jobs ago. He's followed me around. I think tonight presenting would be Josh Carroll. Josh works closely with the city in my 2 years here to come over, make sure we get issued a clean modified opinion. And I think they also have an intern from Morehouse here tonight who's going to sit in on the proceedings. So turn over to Josh right now.
All right. Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us. As Brian said, I'm going to go over the results of the September 30th, 2023 audit. This is, kind of a snapshot in time. Oh, there it goes. Okay, a little bit about Malden and Jenkins. We've been around over 100 years now. We invest a lot of time and energy in state and local governments. I spend 100% of my year working on counties and cities and state agencies and development authorities. So does Doug, and so does everybody else that worked on the city's audit. I don't do any tax work. I don't do any other type of traditional CPA firm work. So we bring a lot of expertise and experience to the city's audit. The statements are the responsibility of the city's management. Our objective as your external auditors express an opinion. We followed all the generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards, and we did issue an unmodified or a clean opinion, which is what you would hope to receive. So as far as we're concerned, your statements are materially correct. We also issue a report on compliance and internal controls. We come in and we visit all the departments of the city. We walk through how you receipt cash, how you disperse cash, how you onboard an employee, terminate an employee, how you process payroll, just all the accounting cycles. And we walk through the controls and the procedures, and we look at that, and we have a clean opinion there as well. We don't have any segregation of duties issues. So that's good to see in a local government. We also issued a report on your single audit. You guys administered, the ARPA money this year. We looked at how you administered that fund from an allowable activities and cost standpoint. You spent it on allowable activities. We didn't spend it on anything it wasn't allowed to be spent on per the compliance supplement and the grant agreement. And we do have one, finding related to that, and I'll kind of go over that in a later slide. This slide, if I was on council, I want to know, do we have anything unusual or aggressive in our accounting policies or our estimates that might sway your statements one way or the other? And you don't. The accounting policies are disclosed in the footnotes. They're pretty standard for all your neighbors have very similar accounting policies, and most of your estimates are just your useful life for your capital assets, how long we think a car is going to last, and your actuary uses several assumptions to estimate your net pension liability, but you're in the GMA plan, and everybody in that plan has the same assumptions, so we looked at those and we feel good about them. We have a good relationship with management. The audit just kind of goes how it's supposed to go. We come in, we ask for a lot of information. Nothing seems hidden or covered up. Every department we visit, they give us whatever we need, sometimes more than what we need. So we appreciate the city, partnering with us to work on getting the annual audit done. It's a big task, not just for the auditors, but for the city. Take some of your employees away from their daily jobs. So we really appreciate you guys partnering with us in making the audit go smoothly. We didn't have any audit adjustments. We get a trial balance from Brian and his group, and we audit it. We do our thing, and everything was how it should be. We didn't have to adjust cash or any expenses or revenues, so it was very clean. So hats off to Brian and his group. They did an excellent job maintaining the ledger and the finances of the city and getting ready for us to come in and do the audit. I mean, that's a major task, so we appreciate Brian and his team. And we are independent. We don't post journal entries. We don't come in and do bookkeeping and things that we get compensated for that might influence the clean opinion that you received. So the next few slides are just kind of financial trends, mostly focusing on your general fund and some of your bigger utility funds. This slide, it kind of shows your general fund. It's the main operating city of the fund. You can see how, I remember when I was a little man and we came into the city, the fund balance has really struggled. It was really low, and the council, took efforts to just correct that. And you can see that over the last 10 years, the fund balance of the general fund has really improved. As it's helped, good to see. The next slide, this is probably the most important slide. It's showing your, your fund balance as a percentage of your total expenditures for the year. And the GFOA is kind of the standard setting body for local governments. They recommend 2 to 3 months at a minimum. It's about 16 to 25%. And you can see, back in 2014, it was down there right on that bubble, and it may have even been below that back in 2008, 9, 10. So the city's really worked to build that up, and we're way above the 2-3 month minimum here. And some of the big tick in 2021 is, sales taxes are pretty strong with the economy, and we were able to transfer some of the COVID money to the general fund. It was the CARES money primarily. We paid our public safety salaries with that one year, so it's just kind of a bonus that, most of our neighbors did the same thing, so just kind of free money there. So we just kind of shore it up, and it's kind of come back down the last couple of years as we started to repay those salary costs. But overall, it's a really healthy fund balance. And this is your utility funds. Your main is your electric and your water. Those are kind of your bigger funds, and you just kind of see the trend here. There's a lot of consistency here with your revenues in those major funds. And then the electric fund, the biggest fund. This slide, you kind of see the blue side's revenues, the brown bucket is expenses, and for a number of years, our revenues exceeded the expenditures, and it kind of flipped on us. And so the funds actually sort of had a little bit of a loss the last couple of years, and I do know the council is aware of that, and I believe we've already kind of addressed some rate changes for the next year and maybe down the road. So I believe that's going to flip back the other way in the current year. So, but the electric fund is still a healthy fund for the city and a good source of operating revenues. So we do have 2 findings. The first one is accounts payable, and this one is just, we go through and we look for expenses that should be posted on an accrual basis of accounting, which meaning you might have incurred some costs in September that the invoice didn't come in until October or November, and it should have been posted in September, and it got posted in October and November. So it's not something I think council should be too concerned with. You didn't have something that didn't get recorded in the accounting system. It just got posted in the wrong period. So we did find that, and we highlighted that. And then in the single audit, I mentioned earlier, we did have the one finding. It relates to procurement. And this is really kind of an overlap from last year. You kind of got dinged twice almost for the same thing here, but we did have those expenditures in the CFA this year, so we have to report it. And I know I've already looked at the new procurement policies that the city's adopted, so I feel like we're on top of this and we're addressing it, but we did have some expenditures that we spent on the federal program that we didn't have a proper procurement for. So we did cite that as a finding just for procurement, not the overall program as a whole, just this one specific requirement of that grant program. But I don't think this is going to be a problem going forward. I know Ryan has spent a lot of time developing and building out, purchasing to address this. And these are management comments on this slide. They don't make it into the audit report. They're just, we came across this in our procedures, and they're more just like an FYI. We had some old outstanding checks. Georgia state sheet laws say if you have something over 5 years, you should sheet it to the state if you can't determine who those checks are due to. So we just kind of recommend that you try to identify who they're due to and contact those individuals. And if you can't, we recommend you turn it over to the state and let them deal with it. And the city doesn't have a written whistleblower policy. That's something we recommend all of our clients have. So we recommend, want some recommendations, we can help with that. We recommend the city implement that as a policy. And then we look at the pension census data. You send all the date of births and date of hires and employee salaries to the actuary, and they use that to estimate your pension liability. We had one employee where I think it was the date of birth or the date of hire. Can't see that far anymore. But it was off by like a year or a month, and so we just kind of recommend you scrub that data and make sure that we're giving the actuaries the right information, so they have the best data to do their thing. And we do have a governmental advisory service group. It's a little different than just a standard audit. We are a full CPA firm, and they do a lot of niche projects for local governments. They kind of deal in those four pillars there. The big one they do is operational assessments. They kind of come in and they're very transactional based. How are we utilizing our resources and our employees and delivering our services to our citizens? What are we doing well? What can we do better? How are we meeting our own internal benchmarks and maybe our comprehensive long-term planning? That could be, one department. It could be HR, finance, public works, utilities, or it could just be, citywide. If that's something council's interested more in hearing about, we'd love to, connect you with the partner that heads up those services. And we also offer IT and cybersecurity. Cybersecurity and IT is a big thing now. It's always in the news. People get hacked. We've had it happen to clients, both large, massive counties and teeny, tiny, small cities. So no one's too big or too small. And so we just kind of recommend, we do offer that, but we also recommend the city stay on top of training our employees and making sure our IT department or outsourcing IT is, staying to date on the new trends, because as soon as one thing is patched and fixed, they come up with something new. It's just going to be there forever, I think. It's ever changing. And GASB's always busy. The last 2 years, we've implemented major accounting standards with leases and subscription-based IT arrangements. We're kind of getting a break from GASB. There's nothing new big going forward for the next couple of years, so it'll be a good break for Brian and us. And we do continue to provide free CPE to all of our clients. We appreciate Brian and his team attending those, and anyone at the city is welcome to attend and get 28 hours of free continuing education every year. They are heavy government accounting standard based, but I'm happy to get anyone signed up. And that's it. Like I said, we appreciate the city partnering with us and working on us. It was a clean audit. You got a clean opinion. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Does any member of council have a question about the presentation?
Yes, Mayor, I do.
Go ahead, Ms. Jones.
Thank you. Could you go back to the slide regarding procurement, ARPA, that finding?
Yes, ma'am. That's fine.
Okay, so you stated that we have been dinged, this is the second time we've been dinged for this issue?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, could you explain it again
Yes.
for me, as well as for our audience, what this is, why it's important, and why you included it in this report?
Sure. So when we get a federal grant, we get a grant agreement, and there's several compliance requirements that we're required to follow when we administer and spend those grant funds. And so as auditors, we test those requirements. And one of them is procurement, suspension, and debarment. And broadly, the federal government doesn't want a recipient of federal funds to pay too much for a service. And so they want us to have a procurement policy in place. You can follow your own procurement policy as a local government. They like that policy to, kind of line up with the general procurement policy. And then there's a further clause, it's called suspension and debarment. There are certain contractors that cannot work with federal funds for whatever reason. They've been debarred or excluded from getting paid for their services with federal funds. And so that was the big thing that we missed, was the suspension and debarment. We didn't check that, and it wasn't included in our contract with the vendor. We're able to go to a website and make sure that vendor was not suspended or debarred, so we did not actually pay a vendor that was suspended or debarred, which is a good thing. But we just, you know, we kind of got lucky there. We didn't really make sure.
So how did you find out that that was an error? If we didn't pay, what was the evidence that showed this?
So it's inquiry with purchasing and finance department, and we look at the contract with the vendor, and we look at the bid files and the RFP, and we kind of comb through that, and we look for, you know, those clauses. And when you hire someone with a federal, to be paid with federal grant money, there's generally a clause that says, you know, you cannot be suspended or debarred to work with this money, and we generally like to see that that's at least a clause in the agreement, or that we went out to the website and we, you know, print screen that we looked at it.
Okay.
And your initial question was, you got dinged twice, yes, this was a repeat from last year, and, you know, sometimes it takes a while to, what month is it? It's July. You know, so you're already almost into the end of your next fiscal year. So you really didn't have time to fix this in enough time to fix it for this audit. But now you've had, you know, almost 2 years. So I don't think it's going to be a problem going forward.
All right, Mr. Stevens, can you talk about what we've put in place now so that this is not a recurring issue?
Sure, and I think what Josh was saying is exactly what the case was. There was some overlap from the time we brought Ms. Little on board. We were about already halfway through the fiscal year last year. So what we did when Ms. Little came on board is we updated our procurement policy. We brought that back again this May to update it and include the suspension and debarment clause, because now any contractor that works with us with being paid by federal dollars has to assert that they're not on the suspension and debarment list. And it also kind of gives us a little cover as a city that this is in our policy. So now every director knows when they procure services using federal dollars, that suspension and debarment list has to be checked. So we've updated our policy twice over the last 14 months to reflect what this finding was.
And I do recall that discussion at council regarding that, so I appreciate that. And then my second question, and I think you can answer that as well, the issue regarding the incorrect birthday information on regarding the pension.
Yes.
Now, that has been a recurring problem as well, and it happened to me specifically. My birthday was incorrect on it, and I just happened to, and I caught that 3 years ago, I believe it was. And the fact that now it has come again. So can you speak to what we will be putting in place? I mean, it's been recommended that we do an annual check regarding that data to make sure. But do we reach out to the employees to have them to double check? And maybe by doing that, have us also to sign that we have checked, that this data is correct. Because that becomes very, very important and a major problem when a person is ready to retire, when they have the wrong birthday.
Yes, ma'am, and I will take your recommendations at heart. I will say that this one lies with human resources. So we don't provide, as a finance department, that date of birth and social security data. That comes strictly from human resources. So I do think it'd be wise of us. And I spoke with Ms. Champagne when I saw this one, and she said, yes, we got that one corrected. But I do think it'd be wise of us to put measures in place to maybe check that annually, as you said, even before we get to the audit part. Maybe at the end of every fiscal year, she needs to go through, not she, our Human Resources Department will go through and do some type of accuracy check on that. So this one doesn't lie with finance, but we can collaborate with our colleague to make sure that we do put something in place.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
And then the last thing I'll say is, thank you for the report. It was, I'm glad to see the recognition of all of the policies and procedures that have been put into place. And I personally want to commend you, Mr. Stevens, and your entire finance team on your due diligence and willingness to bring to this council any issues that needs to be corrected. And you have done that constantly throughout the year. And so I just want to say thank you, and the fact that we have now procurement manager on board has elevated and identified a lot of issues that we didn't recognize before, just had no eyes on it. So that is very, very important. So thank you so much, and please, you and your team, let them all know how much I appreciate it, and that keep up the good work. We really need it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Davis?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just need some clarification under the procurement comment. Is that the same project when we're talking about we did not follow procurement policy for one of the contractors secured for a project? Is that the same one in reference to the DeBart list that we didn't?
Yes, ma'am.
That's the same situation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, and we did talk about that at the retreat.
We did.
Yeah, so I appreciate you, your authenticity as it relates to that. I want to go back to the checks, the outstanding checks.
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
just share some information as to why that exists? And again, what are we going to do to rectify
Yeah.
that? Yeah, if you could.
Yeah, that one kind of caught me off guard. I've been here about a year and a half. So anytime you have checks over $50 that are over 5 years old, you should report those to the Department of Revenue. Cut a check, basically, to the Department of Revenue. First, you have to try to reach out to those individuals. If you don't hear back, checks over $50, over 5 years old, you need to turn that money over to the state.
So are these checks we are paying out?
Yes.
Okay.
These are checks that have been cut. Initial research, because when I saw it, I did meet with my team, and Ms. Little is now the head of that project. But now what we have is we're going to have this resolved by fiscal year end. So there's a possibility some of you may be getting a letter saying, hey, we cut a check for you that hasn't been cashed, and we might have to reissue some checks. Don't count on it, though.
When you
some of
going to
them-
get to this? I'm just,
A lot of them, what we're finding out as we start that process are utility refunds, where people move and their address is not updated. But we have already started that process, and for the team, the deadline is the end of the fiscal year to resolve all of that. So they have already, and what those have been is showing on our bank reconciliation is outstanding checks. And so that's why Malden and Jenkins is saying, hey, you need to turn that money over to the state if you can't reach these people in the 5-year period. So we've already started that. I don't plan on seeing that there next year. But apparently over a number of fiscal years, they've just been carrying as outstanding checks, and we're not going to do that.
thank you. I also want to congratulate you and your department for an outstanding review. This report is really, really excellent. And nothing's perfect. You're going to find some, whatevers, but as long as you are authentic about it, transparent about it, and also have something that you're going to do to prevent it, I think that's good.
Thank you.
So congratulations on a job well done. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I
Yeah,
do.
Ms. Hudson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stevens, for all the great work that you've done. I can tell you've been a great addition to Fairburn in the work and what you're bringing up to speed. My question and focus is going back to ARPA usage. Understanding that the original purpose for ARPA, water, sewer, broadband, infrastructure, I don't know how the ARPA was used. Could you enlighten us how ARPA funds were used in the city of Fairburn?
Yes, ma'am. Well, first of all, I will say this. As a city, we claimed ARPA, we claimed lost revenue. So lost revenue essentially opens us up to use the money as we see fit, but we still have some of the same reporting requirements. So We had a number of projects, small business grant, lift stations for water meter replacement, utility assistance. We had about 10 different projects, which I think council
Salaries.
approved. Say it again.
Salaries,
I think we may have done some salaries in.
public safety.
Point of order,
You still have the floor, go ahead.
yes.
So I think there was a number of things that we did it, and we have to, I think I said this a couple of months ago, we do a report every year by April 30th of how we spent those dollars and what we spent on each one of those projects. I hate to try to tick them off the top of my head, but claiming it as lost revenue did give us a little bit more flexibility outside of the water and other infrastructure things that you can do. Any city that got less than $10 million was able to claim that lost revenue. And again, that gave us added flexibility to do these other projects.
Were there any renovations used, was the ARPA money used for any renovations?
Yes.
And what renovations were those?
I think it was the new city administration building.
New city administration building?
Yes, and our biggest project out of ARPA is Fire Station 23. Pretty much every other director is done spending in ARPA except for Dana. So the remaining funds for this year is all for Fire Station 23. That is by far the biggest project, the biggest spender out of the ARPA funds.
Thank you. And I think that the direction of the funds has purpose in those areas, but I think the priority use, even though we claim lost revenue, should have focused primarily on water and sewer, since the residents have been continuously having those concerns. This is not your responsibility, but to the administration, I asked months ago and continue to ask for the approved projects by City Council to bring myself up to speed and understanding, tracking ARPA as if he gave a 2-year version of what was happening, where the gap was, how we're catching up. The information that I asked for that was approved by council, the project shows what funds were used where and if ARPA was used. So I still need that information like yesterday to me. And that's all the question I have. You've done a great job with helping me, even in the few times that we have spoken, giving me a tutorial and getting me up to speed. At some point, I will have that meeting that Ms. Chris has been trying to set up with you and I to have these longer conversations that don't take up a lot of time and council meeting. But for the record, I think the use of the funds are great. I'm just concerned that there was no priority on water and sewer improvement, even though we got it for lost revenue. And we increased salaries, but we still have citizens in our city who don't have quality water. Thank you.
Any other questions by, statement by council?
Yes,
Okay,
I have a follow-up.
Mr. Whitmer, then I'll come back to you, Ms. Jones.
How you doing, Mr. Stevens?
Good.
Just I would like to echo my colleague to my immediate left. In reference to your department, I know that since the addition of Ms. Little, that you guys have been really pulling and making things happen. So for me, I appreciate that. Also, I'm asking a question in reference to the one item on whistleblower.
Yes, sir.
Pull that, if you can pull that up, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm sure that that's over at the city administrator's desk, and that's being worked on as we speak.
Yes, that is correct, Mayor Pro Tem.
And we should have that completed approximately when?
I'll have a date. We have to run this by the city attorney for review, and so it's a work in progress. So once I have an opportunity to consult with the city attorney on the whistleblower implications legally, by the next council meeting, I can have a date for you.
Okay, thank you, sir. And also in reference to the outstanding checks.
Yes, sir.
I know you've been here, what, a year and a half, I think
Yes,
you
sir.
said? Well, and this has come up 4, 5, 6 years ago.
Really?
So I thought this was done already too.
Okay.
But the fact that it's not, but now it's going to be taken care of.
Oh, it's going to be done.
And
There's no
appreciate
need
that
for
as
us to
well.
sit on money that's not ours, and legally, it's not ours. But I will tell you, the number of checks that added up to that total, I think was like 400 and something checks. So the average check amount is pretty small. Like I said, a lot of them are utility refunds. The ones under $50, you don't have to do the same process with, but it's tedious, but it's still something that I told the team we have until the end of the fiscal year to complete.
Yeah. Yes, it is tedious.
Yes.
But if it's an
necessary.
ongoing process throughout the year versus the end of the year, then it wouldn't appear to be as tedious. So.
I agree.
All right, so thank you, and I appreciate it. Please echo my sentiments to your staff as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ms. Jones, you-
Yes, I wanted to follow-up question regarding the outstanding checks as well. And that is, so there, I see two steps in this process. One is, finding the owners of those checks and/or sending the money to the state. But could you speak to now what will be, or do we have in place, a policy regarding how do we address this from this point on?
Yeah, and that's something I was thinking about over the last couple of weeks because I spoke with others who say in other cities, they passed a policy where if it's over a year old, then they just void the checks. So my staff will have to, since we don't have that policy in place, we actually have to do the legwork on these. So it would be up to us, I guess, to bring the council if you guys want to pass a policy that says after a year we void these checks. Because I can tell you now, the void process is going to be more tedious. And so I personally would like for us to void them after a year. And that's not to cheat anybody out of their money. I just know that, after a year, either you lost a check or you moved, you didn't get the check. Like it's going to cost us a lot of postage just to send out these letters. But we have to do it because we're basically 4 or 5 years behind on it. But I personally would recommend a policy that after a year, if the check hasn't cleared, we shouldn't be carrying it as an outstanding check. We probably should go ahead and void it.
Okay, so then what is our policy to reach out to individuals? Because if I recall, the policy on the books regarding utility checks is that you had to request them. So if I'm a customer and I think I'm owed a refund, it's up to me to request. Is that the same
I don't
policy?
think that's the, I think our customer service operation over here in utilities sends all those check requests where there is a credit over to our department and we actually cut the checks. A lot of times the checks are returned to sender, but I'm not aware that they have to actually request a refund. I know when utilities was in finance, that was not the process that I was used to. The process that I was used to is that the customer service team would generate a check request. If an account closed out, the customer service team would generate a check request, and that would come to finance, and then we would cut the check and mail it out to the addressee.
Okay, so does the customer know they're due a refund?
I cannot answer that today, Ms. Portis Jones, but I will work with
Yeah, so
Mr.
that, I
Hampton
mean, that
and find
speaks-
out.
Yeah, okay, so that speaks to how and when we're communicating
Okay.
to the customer, right?
Yep.
Because if I know I'm going to get a refund,
Be looking.
my behavior will be a lot different if I don't know that I'm getting a refund, right? And if I'm making contact with you to disconnect my service that I am moving, that would be appropriate time to review the account and have that conversation with the customer. So I'm asking if we'll just review
Okay.
our process in how we communicate
Okay.
with the customer. Because if monies are owed, those customers should receive those funds. And I think we'll need further discussion about the voiding the checks.
Okay.
I don't think that's the answer.
Okay.
But I'm willing to hear staff's recommendation regarding that. But I think it behooves us to make concerted effort to communicate with the customer that they have a refund.
And I will work with Mr. Hampton, our utilities director, on what that process is.
Okay.
That kind of falls under his purview now, and we just cut the checks. But I will work with him and see if we can get back to you on that for sure.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
One more
all
follow-up.
right, go ahead, sir.
Doing your research on all this, One of the reasons it goes to the state is because the state has a certain website where if people think they're owed money, they can go in and put their information in there and it will show up. That's the reason why it goes to the state.
Yep.
Now, I think you already identified that it'd be even more tedious if we had a policy where after 12 months, we voided the check. People will check with the state sooner than they will check with a city, especially if they moved out. And the other concern or thought that I have is most people that are owed a refund is when they put a deposit down because of their credit. And if they're here 20 years, they forgot about that deposit, unless we have a policy, whereas if they have been consistent on a month-to-month basis for whatever period of time, then we would send back that deposit. That's something else that I think that we should be looking into. So you have a couple of things that we can look into, but I will be strong in opposition of canceling checks versus sending it to the state. That's only me speaking. But that's only because I know what I had to do for my dad in New Jersey. And that's how I found out there was monies out there for him, because the state had it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. At this time, we're going to come to our utility director, correct, Mr. City Administrator? Yeah.
Mayor and council, our new and very impactful utilities director, Mr. Derek Hampton, asked for an opportunity to provide an update. We have had several power outages due to recent storms, and he just wanted to give a brief update. And so at this time, I'll defer to Mr. Hampton.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Good evening.
As you all know, we have had a rash of outages here lately, the last month and a half in the city. Mayor, we've had some early morning conversations and things of that nature. So I did want to talk to you guys and give you kind of an update of some of what's causing these things and what our stance is on it going forward. There has been a variety of causes, first of all, let me say that. We've had everything from lightning to trucks hitting poles to tree limbs and trees and all kind of stuff. And it's just been a concentration of it, just luck of the draw, they all happen around here at the same time. So that being said, some of it was preventable, some of it was not. Some of the things that we're putting into the upcoming fiscal year's budget will be things that you guys will review, additional monies and things like tree trimming, so we can try to get some of these limbs and stuff back from the line, some reconductoring projects and things of that nature. But I did want you guys to know that it is being reviewed, it is being watched. One of the other things that we want to address is the response times. We've been running very thin on the electric department. I don't know if you guys are aware, but we've been running with 1 or 2 line crew personnel the whole time I've been here, pretty much. And we're having to rely on outside sources when things like the other night happened with the truck, waiting on help to come from other sources such as East Point or contractors. That takes longer. We are in the process of hiring additional personnel. We've been interviewing constantly here lately. So we're building that up going into the next fiscal year. So I did want to address that with you guys and kind of hopefully give you some confidence in the fact that it is being reviewed, it is being addressed, it is a lengthy process. We cannot afford to fix everything in 1 year, obviously, but we're phasing some projects and things of that nature to get some benefit immediately as much as we can. So I didn't know if you guys had anything specific you wanted to discuss.
Thank you for that update. Number one, I want to talk about the most recent one last week over here by the cleaners.
Yes, sir.
And I do understand it was a tractor trailer, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's not a place that a tractor trailer should be, is that correct?
That is correct.
So what are we doing, what is our policy, number one, and what are we doing to recoup our man hours when we going out to repair something that was negligent on the driver's part.
Okay.
Whether it's a truck driver or an accident or whatever the case may be, everybody has insurance.
Right. Yes. So in situations like, first of all, and I haven't driven out there and verified this myself, but it's my understanding it is posted, no truck traffic through that area. It's my understanding. So I'm not sure why they decided to go that way instead of going down to catch the light. But anyway, it was a long, and one of the things I want to stress that I've paid attention to, you know, I know citizens get upset when, you know, these outages are taking time, but, you know, it's costing city money every minute that the power's out. So we don't take it lightly, because check one of them, it was just a few houses, and I ran some numbers when I added in overtime costs, lost revenue, everything. It was coming up to about $700 an hour, and that was just on a little small tap with a few houses on it. So you start looking at bigger customers, obviously, or a larger number of customers. That hurts our bottom line, things of that nature. So with that truck, what we will do is we'll calculate everything, which is my understanding has already been done. And we will file that against their insurance as a claim,
And
recoup that money.
that's reviewed by legal, I'm sure. I'm assuming, I shouldn't
Risk
say I'm
management.
sure.
Yeah, it goes through risk
Risk
management.
management.
It's management, okay. There you go. Now, let's talk about the tree limbs. Now, for the past year and a half, we've been talking about it, and I know the city has contracted an arborist that has been going throughout the city and trimming tree limbs, rather. And is that still in progress?
Yes, we do have a trimming contractor that goes around to trim limbs and things back from the lines. I wasn't here, it's my understanding some of that funding was reduced from what was proposed in the last year's budget. So basically what ends up happening, they charge by the hour, and they basically trim until the money runs out. So if the whole system is not trimmed and the money runs out, you prioritize certain feeders that have a lot of tree issues. But once the money runs out, they go home until the next budget year. So one of the things we increased this year was an ask for additional funding. Another thing that happened about 3 years ago, I believe, when everybody was going up, they actually put it off. Everybody else went up for like 2 or 3 years, and they held their price, and then they increased their price. Well, of course, if you don't increase your line item in the budget, that amount of trimming you get shrinks. So not only did they start out with not enough to trim the whole system, the amount they could trim actually was reduced. So that was one of the things that we actually put in this proposed one, was some additional funds to try to get more of that. And the other problem with that is these guys can only trim so high. We've got trees in town that are so tall, they don't even have equipment that can get up that high. They trim them up as high as their bucket can reach. And if it's higher than that, you know, we could catch the limbs, but if the tree falls, you know.
Mayor Pro Tem, one additional point of information. The city actually has 2 tree trimming contracts. One is in utilities. The other is in general services with Ms. Gail Hicks' department. They focus on the main thoroughfares throughout the city, and they do tree trimming there, whereas the tree trimming done under the contract in utilities is more specific to utility infrastructure and power lines. But there are 2 separate tree contracts that are presented for funding in each year's budget.
Okay, and looking at the budget for both, and we get ready to go into budget session, so you know what's coming, right? We're gonna ask some hard questions about that, because the hardest part of the city that gets hit, in my opinion, and I may be wrong, is Rivertown Road. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
So Rivertown Road should be a major focus. So we should be identifying all those trees. And now I have an additional concern now, is because if you're telling me that some of the trees are so tall that they don't have equipment to really go out and take care of those particular trees, what do we do?
Put it underground.
Put it on the ground?
Underground. Put the
Put it
wires on.
underground?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now I understand we've been Well, there's a plan to do that too,
Yes.
correct? Where are we at?
You will
in
see that in the budget as well. So you and your council colleagues will have the decision to decide what you'd like to fund and at what levels. Because we've got projects identified to move those ground lines underground. There's a significant cost to that. Rivertown Road has, I want to be clear, has had tree trimming. But I want to make it sound as if it's been neglected. But
No,
it's
I know it has been.
Yeah, but it's ongoing. You have to
lot.
continue to trim them. And then to your point about those trees that are too tall to be trimmed, Mr. Hampton just explained the most effective thing is for us to move that. And there is a specific expenditure identified in the budget to begin that process.
Okay, thank you.
The proposed budget. Yes.
My third question is in reference to the lack of linemen. And I know you're out canvassing and trying to find some linemen, and
Yes,
I
sir.
know we need them.
Yes.
But also with our organization that we're with, Mr. Phillips,
Yes, sir.
is it MEAG?
ECG.
ECG. ECG. Now, because we belong to ECG and we pay money into ECG, correct?
Yes, sir.
What equipment do they have, or what assistance can they provide to help litigate some of the tree situations that we're having?
To help with the tree trimming?
Can I speak on that? So in the, we have what's called a mutual aid agreement. They do not themselves have any tree equipment to offer. Now, what they do is they vet the tree trimming contracts on a statewide basis. They narrow it down to 2 to 3 different options of tree contractors that they go. They check all the insurance and bonding and quality of work and things of that nature. And then they give that to the cities so that therefore the cities are not having to run around and do all this stuff on their own. That's included in what we pay them. The limitation on the height of the trees is really an equipment thing. Like they have tree contractors that can take down or address trees that tall. They're way more expensive than trimming contractors because they have to bring in cranes and things of that nature to handle a tree of that size. So that's not something a trimming contractor would do. You have to actually get a tree contractor in to do that kind of work.
Okay. And let me apologize to you publicly. I directed my question to the city administrator, but you had to answer.
No, fine, that's fine.
So I apologize. I should have started with you and then went over to him.
That's no problem.
My other question, and this is just going back my years of experience in dealing with trees, we still have some of those old timers or old processes that we put the spikes on and we go up the tree and we start taking one limb at a time, bringing it down, but we do it safely by having that line on there and making sure it's clear so when it comes down, it's not going to no one hit the lines nor hit anybody in the work area. Are we using anyone with that expertise?
I know they have that company. I've used them at my whole job also. I know they have climbers. Whether or not they've actually done it, I don't know. I know they have the spikes and the harnesses and everything in order to do it. One of the things you have to worry about is when you get a tree that old, it's got a limb that tall, sometimes you can hurt the tree cutting that much of it off. And then you have people wanting you to reimburse them for that tree. So we try not to actually cut one to the point that it hurts it.
So then that goes into the next phase of my questioning, and that would be for those homeowners that have those large trees that are close to the right-of-way and they're over our lines. What is our process now? How do we address and take care of that in such a way? I'm not trying to harm the homeowners.
Right.
I know it's going to cost a couple of $1,000s to bring a tree down. All right? So what's your thoughts along those lines?
So the rule of thumb is if the trunk of the tree is on the line, the right-of-way line, or on the private property, we don't cut the tree down. That's a private-owned tree if it's on their property. If it's on the line or over into the right-of-way, The problem is, a lot of times when these trees go up, they look for light. A lot of times there's trees behind that tree, so it's shaded on the backside. Over here is the street, so it's more sun, so they grow like this toward the road. So even though the trunk of the tree is in the person's yard, the problem for us is that it's doing this toward the line. The other thing I caution with that is it takes so much time to trim a tree like that, is that the rest of your system probably won't get trimmed. They would spend literally a whole day, at least 1 to 3 days, just to trim one tree, versus they could do a whole street in that time.
I have some other thoughts, but I'll come and talk one-on-one with the city administrator.
Okay.
Any more questions by council? Seeing none, we'll start our meeting at 10 minutes. Thank you so much.